Realtors. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Charley Ray. I'm a realtor from Conway, South Carolina, and I have the pleasure of serving as the NAR Realtor Federal Political Coordinator for Congressman Tom Rice. Morris.
Thank you, Charlie. My name is Morris Lyles, and I am from Columbia, and I'm proud to serve as the president of the South Carolina Realtors this year. We're honored to have Congressman Tom Rice here today with us and thank him for his leadership in Washington, D.C. and his support of the real estate industry and home ownership.
Thank you, Morris. May is the time of year we all look forward to attend the Realtors Legislative Meetings in our nation's capital. But due to the coronavirus, for the last couple of years, this makes the second year in a row that we have done these meetings virtually. And while we prefer to be together in person, it does give us an opportunity to reach out to our 26,000 realtors in South Carolina to allow them to join our discussion. I do hope that going forward, that we'll be able to return to our meetings in the nation's capital, Washington, next year. And hopefully today, with our members joining us virtually, they'll be inspired to join us in the nation's capital when hopefully we'll be together again next year.
Absolutely, Charlie. Normally we have about 125 realtors from South Carolina attend these meetings. Now we get to share that experience with all of our members. We know that the congressman is on a tight schedule, so let's go ahead and get started.
Morris, before we get started, I'd like to just call on Tom to give us a little update on some of his, on his family and some of his current activities, some of your personal activities, Tom. I recall last year this time, you joined us from your cabin at the Ace Basin and did so with a hotspot on your phone. So share with us a little about your family, a little about you and what you've been doing for fun.
Well, the coronavirus certainly changed our schedules, everybody's, I'm sure, an awful lot. And I actually spent more time at my cabin than I ever have in my life last year. Cabin's kind of isolated, and we went to Zoom meetings. And normally I'm in Washington 3/4 of the time. Last year it was probably 1/3 of the time, and half the other third I was in Colleton County, where my cabin is. But thank goodness the coronavirus is waning, and a lot of credit to the Trump administration and Operation Warp Speed for seeing that happen. And so many people have been vaccinated now, and the illness numbers go down every day, and the death numbers go down every day. And we started doing live town halls again last month. We've done 7 now. So I'm happy to be back out there with people. It's a whole lot more satisfying, and it's a whole lot more effective when you can see people face to face.
That's right.
It is. We were talking about that before we got on. It's nice to be able to be back around people and see them. Absolutely. Congressman, as the U.S. continues to recover from this pandemic, realtors are monitoring a number of issues that are impacting the nation's homeowners, the real estate industry, the health of our mortgage market, and American consumers everywhere. There are 9.5 million jobs in the real estate, rental, and leasing industry, and every 2 home sales generate 1 job in this country. The issues that matter to our industry matter to our nation, and they'll play a critical role in America's economic recovery.
You're exactly right, Morris. Tom, throughout the pandemic, the residential real estate market has had a positive economic impact on homeowners, communities, and the economy. In fact, I really feel that it has led the economy in the recovery during the pandemic. We find ourselves now at a historic 50-year high with prices and affordability. Supplies are very short, very limited. What can Congress do to help alleviate the shortage and also to help first-time homeowners especially attain home ownership?
Well, it is an interesting time. And I recall back when I practiced law, you know, my wife's a realtor as well. She does commercial leasing. But I remember back when I practiced law, it was a little reminiscent of the 2005, 2006 time frame. And right now with interest rates so low, the good thing for the housing market and consumers and for realtors and for the economy generally is that a $300,000 house today has about the same payment as a $200,000 house did 2 years ago. I'm a little worried about interest rates, to be honest with you, and I would advise people to be cautious because, my friend, you and I both know it will not stay this way. And if the federal government continues to borrow hand over fist, that is going to be a driver of the of interest rates. You saw last month that interest rates went up. The inflation rate, consumer inflation, was up over a 4% annual rate, which is the highest since 2008. And so we have to be very, very cautious to not overextend ourselves. And when I say that, I'm talking about the government, which is one of the reasons why I voted against this last coronavirus relief package. It wasn't really a coronavirus relief package. Entitlement package that paid people not to work, and we're seeing the results of that right now, particularly in the branch frame, but all over the district where you got no hiring sales, signs that people can't hire anybody because the government's paying them more not to work. But if we continue to borrow, we continue to put pressure on the debt markets, then I think that places that's going to lead to more and more inflation. Interest rates are going to go up, and see stress on the housing market. That's the main thing that bothers me. Right, it's not so much that well, I think that the shortages you see are because of very, very low, historically low interest rates, the lowest they've been in my lifetime. I've been through at least 4 cycles, and even through and since I came out of college in 1982, out of law school, interest rates have been continuously going down. But it's not going to. The federal government now has $30 trillion in debt. I feel like we had to do what we did with the CARES Act, the 2 bipartisan relief packages. I think we hadn't done that CARES Act back in the PPP loan back in last April. I think that we would have gone into a depression, and we were sitting where we are right now. But they're clearly coming way out. Well, anywhere in the district, the economy is beginning to form. What I believe we need to do, the federal government needs to really be careful about any further relief. We don't need to borrow any more money that we don't need. We don't need to pay people any more money to stay home. And get out of the bank and work on ways to curb our spending rate. I think, again, if we keep borrowing money, this is not going to end well. It's not going to end well. If interest rates, think about this. I hate to be negative, but think about this. Right now, the federal government is $30 trillion. People can't even conceive that number. You just throw it out there, people don't know what it means. But if interest rates on the federal government is paying on treasury bills averages, let's say 1.5%, very, very low, historically low. So that's $450 billion a year. Well, our domestic spending, you know, what we spend on everything outside of Social Security, Medicare, and the big entitlement program, what we spend on the government is about $1.2 trillion a year. So interest is about a third of what we spend total to run the government. Now, what happens if interest rates go to 3%, which is still historically low? Now you're paying $900 billion. What happens if they go to 6%? Which, my friend, you and I both know, treasury bills were at 6% not that long ago in our lifetime, back in the mid-2000s, right? They go to 6%, we're going to be spending more money on interest than we are on running every bit of the government. I can just see, I mean, we're in, you know, a scary time right here in terms of interest rates. That's, to me, the bigger issue, the bigger concern for realtors.
Thank you, Representative Rice. That's an interesting way to look at it. And when you do put it in those terms, it's, you know, the interest rates have been so low, you know, that it really, you know, when you're borrowing this much money, When they start going up, it's not a good thing.
What can happen is it can cascade,
Right.
get out of control. And, right now the federal Fed, and guys, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to be realistic. Okay. I'm trying to tell you what I see and what I think. And back in 2006 and 2007, when I practiced law in Myrtle Beach and represented home builders, and they come in and buy tracts of land. And I say the tract of land they're buying cost $100,000 an acre. Charley knows what I'm talking about. In 2 years, and somebody else bought that same tract of land 12 months before for $50,000 an acre. And somebody else bought that tract of land 2 years before for $25,000 an acre. And I would tell these folks, guys, it's not going to stay like this. So you need to be cautious. And that's what I'm telling y'all right now.
Sure. No,
it's not going to stay the way it is, and we need to be cautious. Don't get too far, don't get too exuberant, don't get too far ahead of yourself.
No, that's great advice, and thank you. Congressman, if more residential housing is made available as part of our effort to improve the nation's infrastructure, opportunities to access the wealth building benefits of home ownership will increase alongside the employment levels and economic activity. Indeed, a recent study estimates that the U.S. has developed an underbuilding gap of 5.5 million housing units. That's about a year's worth of inventory, is what in the United States over the last 20 years. And it translates into a $4.4 trillion underinvestment in housing. Even relatively modest steps taken now to reduce this gap would unleash tremendous economic activity, create millions of new jobs. Realtors do support the Bipartisan Housing Supply and Affordability Act and the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. Can we count on your support for these bills?
I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know about these bills until I got your prep for this meeting. And asked my staff to check on them, and they are recommending that I co-sponsor the first one, and I will commit to do that. The second one I want to look a little bit more at. They've given me some background on it, but I don't want to commit to something and not do it. And I just want to make sure. I have a couple of questions about that.
Yes, sir.
You can count in.
All right, thank you.
Tom, I'd like to just chat with you a few minutes about Code Section 1031. My understanding is that it's on the table, and a lot of discussion going on about 1031, eliminating or limiting the use of IRS Code 1031. Folks, those of you on today with us, Tom has probably done as many 1031s as any attorney in the state. He's been very active in that over the years. So he and I don't miss an opportunity to get in the weeds sometime, and I'm going to try to avoid doing that today. But Tom, you and I know that 1031 is a very valuable tool to unlock a lot of real estate that really is locked because of capital gains taxation. And folks can move their equity and free up a property for economic development, and sometimes, especially for residential units, housing, condos, it creates a lot of economic activities. And so if we lose 1031, a lot of that property is going to continue to be locked up because folks are just not going to sell it because of taxation. I think 1031 is very valuable, and we sure would appreciate if you would support that and help us with that going forward.
I've always been supportive of 1031. When we went through tax reform, I wanted to tighten it up a little bit, but because in my opinion, it's just a little too broad. But the idea that we would do away with that is, I just can't imagine that they could pull it. I can't imagine. I don't think any Republicans would support that, and I think there's a few Democrats out there that wouldn't support it either. But we had a hearing yesterday in the tax subcommittee on Ways and Means, and that was one of the discussion points. And their argument is that that the tax code it gives rich people too many breaks, and that rich people need to, quote unquote, pay their fair share. And what they say is because Warren Buffett famously says that he pays less taxes than the secretary. And what he's talking about is the capital gains tax rate. They want to eliminate the capital gains tax rate altogether. They want tax on capital gains to go to 43%. So that would be an incredible shock to the economic system. And when we had their experts up yesterday, I asked one of them, I said, you know, why would any industrial company have a favorable tax rate for investment? Well, the answer is obvious, because you want to encourage capital investment, because that gives workers more tools that makes them more productive, number one. Number two, if you have more investment, you have more innovation. And this country is the center of innovation in the world. And one of the reasons is because of our capital structure. And, you know, I want our country to be competitive. I want companies to come here. And if we did away with the capital gains rate so that they could go, every other industrial company has favorable rates for capital. So they could go anywhere else and pay less taxes. Guess what? Say goodbye to millions of Americans. So and then the 1031, they say rich people use that. Because, you know, the truth is that that when you're in poverty, that you don't have investments. So that's obvious. So they say investments favor wealthy people. Again, there's reasons why we want capital. They say 1031 is a mechanism for wealthy people that have investments to avoid paying those capital gains taxes. So obviously those 1031 is there for a reason. And you know, the real estate investment, and I'm heavily invested in real estate, for disclosure. I have, you know, office buildings and a couple of shopping centers. So real estate investment does have some preferential treatment in the tax code, but that benefits not just realtors, it benefits the entire company. And if the stock market has advantages too, its primary advantage is liquidity. You can't just immediately liquidate a piece of real estate, but you can immediately liquidate your stock. If you took away the share of any of the preferences, the big preferences for real estate, then you're going to see a transition of people out of real estate and into the stock market. So now, I don't think there's any way that 1031 is going away. I think that no Republican that I know of would support that, and I think there's enough Democrats that would stand up and say we can't.
Tom, that sounds like a loud yes. You're supportive.
Yeah.
Tom, let me just change the subject slightly. Independent contractor status. And with the gig economy, that's gotten a lot of attention. And so there are changes that are proposed with independent contractor status. The independent contractor status is a model that has worked for the real estate industry. We have been, I understand, defined by statute as statutory independent contractors, the real estate industry. And we would sure appreciate your support in preserving that contractor status for realtors. The other thing that happens, we have about 1.4 million real estate agents in the country. 87% of them are independent contractors. If we were to lose the independent contractor status, I think probably half of those would go away. And I think so many people would not have the opportunity to enter the industry if they were going to be employees. I just don't think we'd find employers to hire them. And so it would deprive them of an opportunity. And again, that model has worked real well for the real estate industry. Sure would appreciate you taking a look at it, supporting us on it, and the opportunity maybe to circle back around and talk with you about it as things move forward.
Short answer is absolutely. I would not support any change to the independent contractor status of realtors for all the reasons you just said. But also, as a tax lawyer, over the years, I had the opportunity to deal with the IRS coming back and reclassifying people who had been treated as independent contractors to employees, not realtors necessarily, contractors and subcontractors and so forth. And it was devastating to the businesses. I mean, the IRS would go back and reclassify somebody for the last 10 years and the contractor a bill for $500,000 in payroll taxes. And the tax code classification of people they use to determine employees versus independent contractors is absurdly complicated. 28-part test. And I actually have a bill up that would simplify it and make it easier for people to be classified, not realtors, because they're, per se, but other kinds of businesses as independent. And I want to go back just a minute to the prior question when you were talking about how their Biden administration's statement that the tax code is unfair and that therefore we need to do away with things like capital gains treatment and 1031s that unfairly benefit wealthy people. Just some statistics here that I mentioned in the hearing yesterday. The top 1% of income from this country pay 40% of the income tax. Top 10%, 10% pay 70.1%. The top 50% of income earners pay 97% of the income. And the bottom 44%, of earners in this country pay zero income tax. Zero. They actually get more back from the federal government than they. So in my opinion, we just need a fair tax code. Literally, it appears pretty fair to me. And in fact, over the last 40 years, the percentage of taxes paid by the upper income brackets has increased. The hit you always heard on the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was, I believe, President Trump's primary feather in his cap, his primary achievement. And I helped write that bill, and particularly the part for small businesses and pass-through. And pretty much every piece of commercial real estate you see out there is in a pass-through, an LLC, a partnership, or an S corporation. And I helped write that. I stood firm for that pass-through deduction to be put in place because I didn't want C corps and big companies to have a competitive advantage with a lower tax rate than small companies. But that primary achievement, the big hit you always hear on it, is that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act benefited the wealthy. That is absolute nonsense. And if you look at how progressive the tax code is before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and after, in fact, wealthy people pay a bigger percentage of the taxes today than they did before the tax code. I know I get in the weeds too much, my friend.
No worries, Congressman. That's good information. And Congressman, as stewards of the right to own, use, and transfer private property, our livelihoods and businesses as realtors depend on an open housing market that's free from discrimination. Our economy, our communities, the American people suffer when discrimination and segregation artificially constrain homeownership and limit the intergenerational wealth that it builds. Yet more than 50 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, the homeownership rates for African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans continues to lag behind that of white Americans. What can Congress do to help?
And the biggest thing we can do is get people plugged into the economy. I would like to see a statistic on the racial breakup of housing by people who are poor, because I suspect that it's roughly the same. And I don't just represent Myrtle Beach. I just don't represent Orange County. I have 8 counties. I have 3 of the 4 counties in South Carolina. Marysville and Auburn. They're a majority African American. 30% of the people live in poverty. 30% of the people are outside the workforce. And I think the best thing that we did under President Trump, and the thing that I'm the most proud of in my tenure in Congress, is that with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and with the trade rebalance with China and with Mexico and Canada, we stopped jobs going overseas, brought some back, and then infrastructure. We put the bill and inland port right in the middle of those 3-4 counties. And let me tell you, I totally agree that in many places, African Americans were given a short shrift for 100 years, and that we need to work hard to make sure that everybody has opportunity. And when we put that deal in the port right in the middle of the 3-4 counties, only 90,000 people live in those counties, and they're shrinking because there wasn't any opportunity. There were people leaving instead of like 40 counties growing and flourishing, right? So we put that Dillon Inland Port over there, maybe 50,000 people in the workforce, created 2,000 jobs in 2 years. 2,000 jobs with 50,000, 2.5% drop in the unemployment rate. When I took office in Marion, the unemployment rate in Marion County was 15%. Last a year and a half ago, just before COVID, and COVID set us back. But just before COVID, the unemployment rate in Marion County was 3.8%, dropped from 15% to 3.8% in 6 years when I was in Congress. And I'll take all the credit. No, I didn't do it myself, but I played a part in it. And from the day that Donald Trump took office, the unemployment rate in Marion County was 9.6%. And a year and a half after Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, trade rebalance, regulatory, juice the economy, Dillon Inland Port, all that stuff combined, wasn't an accident, wasn't a miracle, it was a strategy. The unemployment rate drops from 9.6% to 3.8%. You give people opportunity. You pull people into the American economy. You know, a lot of them lived in generational poverty, never even thought they had an opportunity. You pull people into the economy, you solve a lot of problems. You solve housing problems, you solve family problems, you solve drug problems, you solve crime problems, you solve entitlement problems, you solve deficit problems, you solve a whole lot of problems. So my answer to that question, how do you equalize, how do you give everybody a fair shot? You give them opportunity. If they have opportunity and they believe it and they see it, because they've been lied to a lot, and they see it, they'll take it, and then you'll see this housing thing. That's the primary thing.
Good. Thank you, Tom. Tom, the Biden administration recently introduced the American Family Plan. We appreciate the administration's effort to lead our nation on a path to economic recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic. We really appreciate the proposal to deal with infrastructure, transportation challenges, but we believe that there are some proposals in the plan that will negatively impact economic growth and depress commercial real estate. Most of those items that we're concerned about have to do with pay-for provisions with the tax provisions. What is your take on the American Family Plan? And before you answer, let me just add this comment. Back in 2012, when you went to DC, one of your goals, and you worked long and hard, was to get a competitive tax code. It does appear to me that many of the provisions of the Biden plan takes away a lot of those competitive items. And so I think we have the same concerns.
Yeah, I'm obviously very much against it. You know, this last plan that they did, American Rescue Plan. Well, you know, America was already rescued before they did the American Rescue Plan. They did it on the guise of a coronavirus relief bill, and about 8% of it actually went to coronavirus relief, and they built a bunch of entitlements. And they gave everybody a $1,400 check, which is how they sold it. Yeah, we'll take a $1,400 check. Well, what they didn't do, what they didn't tell you was $1.9 trillion is what they borrowed last time. Now they want to do 1.8 for what you're talking about. 1.9 and you divide it by 330 million people who live here. See, people you can't conceive of how big these numbers are. But it works out to about $5,500 for every man, woman, and child in the country. When they did that last bill without a single Republican vote, it was on a pure party line basis. They borrowed $5,500 for every man, woman, child in the country. And basically they put up a bunch of new temporary entitlement programs. They extended the extra pay for unemployment at $300 a week through September. Well, that was great for our economy. Certainly great for the tourism industry, right? Keep people out of the workforce and on the sidelines through September. Wow, what a great idea. And they expanded a bunch of other entitlements, and to do it, and they gave everybody a $1,400 check, and to do it, they borrowed from your children and you and our grandchildren $5,500 per person. Well, guess what? I'm not paying it back. And Charlie, you sure as heck aren't paying it back. You know who's going to pay it back? Your grandkids are going to pay it back. And they're going to pay it back in the form of higher taxes and less ability for the government to react to catastrophe. Less ability of the government to react to international crises, less opportunity for people. Now, do I want to go borrow another $1.8 trillion and another $5,500 for every man, woman, and child in the country to set up more entitlement programs to pay people to stay out of the workforce? When you go and ride around in Myrtle Beach, but not just Myrtle Beach, you go ride around in Conway, but not just Conway, and you go ride around in Florence and Marion and everywhere else, and everybody's got hiring signs up, and they can't get people to go to work because they get paid more to sit at home with the $300 a week unemployment. You think I favor borrowing more money to set up more entitlement programs? Absolutely not. And I don't know of any Republicans that do. They might get one or two Republicans votes. Well, they didn't get a single one last time. And I suspect they're going to have a hard time getting. There's a very narrow majority in Congress. The Democrats have about a 5-seat majority. If five Democrats decide that they can't sell it and they're up for re-election in a year and a half, this may well not get across the line. My hope is that it will not get across the line. And to finish one other thing, way long, but you're right when you said we need a competitive tax code. And you're right, I said that when I ran in 2012. And we got it with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And look at the results. Look at the result. In a year and a half, we had record lows in unemployment across the country, 3.8%, right? But not just for the general population, not just for old white men, right? It was for women, it was for African Americans, it was Hispanics. They have never had the level of opportunity that they had just a year and a half ago before this damn coronavirus, which I hope was an accident, right? So Marion County, Dillon County, Marlborough County, poorest counties in the country, I mean, in the state, probably among the poorest in the country, 3.8% unemployment in Marion County. Just amazing. And Biden and Obama, after the financial crisis, the response was, let's clamp down on banking with Dodd-Frank, do away with one of the American advantages of access to capital. Let's put in massive government programs, Obamacare, and let's raise taxes. The result was it took 10 years. Took 10 years to get back to the level of unemployment they had under, before the financial crisis. With our competitive tax code in place and competitive trade policy and all these things, well, the coronavirus hit, which was much worse than the financial crisis. The unemployment immediately went 15%. Well, heck, it's already back to 6. We've already recovered more unemployment than Joe Biden and Obama did in 8 years. We've already done that. And it'll be back way below 5 here in a couple more months if we just stay the hell out of the way. And what does Biden want to do? He wants to go back and do exactly what he did 10 years ago with Obama and put on a bunch more government programs and a bunch more taxes. And guess what? He will stagnate the economy again. They never learn. They never learn. They think the government has to be everybody's nanny, right? Keep people out of the workforce. And if you rely on the government to take care of you, my friend, you will always live in poverty. That is a fact. I'm sorry. Does that very clearly answer your question, my friend?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It did. And thank you. And Congressman, before we go on a lighter note, we've got one final question. You know, we were talking about the last 12 months. We all were locked down, and I enjoyed spending some time with my family. I also got kind of tired of spending a lot of time with my family over it. But a lot of us learned, new things like maybe to cook certain dishes and speak a new language. What was your favorite COVID pastime?
Well, I actually had more, as I said, time with my family last year and spent more time with my cabin than I had in my whole life, because you couldn't go out and see people and you couldn't have meetings. And a lot of my job got, pulled out from under me. So my wife had me doing some gardening, which I hadn't done much of that. And I got to do a little more fishing, which I love. In 8 years in Congress before the coronavirus, or 6 years before the coronavirus, I might have played 20 rounds of golf. Well, I played at least 20 last year, so I doubled my golf. And no, it was great, being back with my family. This job, I love this job, and I'm proud of what we've gotten done, and I'll keep fighting it I mean, fighting for you, but it does take away from your family time. It does take away from things that you love to do, and it was nice to have a little refresher of all that and get reconnected.
It was. Thank you very much. And, you know, on behalf of Charley and our 26,000 commercial and residential realtors, South Carolina Realtors want to thank you for what you do in Washington, and thank you for your support over the years. And we look forward to working with you in the future, and also visiting you when we come up to DC next time.
Yeah, and you know, I'm glad y'all didn't come last year, certainly. And this year, we're still kind of semi-shut down. There's still a fence on the Capitol, which is bothers the heck out of me. It's the people's house. It's not those that have it's not Fort Pelosi. We're not those that have a fence around it. But the restaurants finally this month have opened back up, and the town is starting to come back to life. And so you haven't missed anything not being here. Washington's been a little on the depressing side the last year, but next year I think we'll be back up and running.
Great. We look forward to it, and thank you again for your time today.
All right. Y'all take care.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.